Okay, we are not live. This is a pre-recorded show of Dynasty Saturday Night 5, a Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast from the Going for Two Live Network. Please remember to like, subscribe, review, etc. on the audio feed, and also here on the video feed. Like, comment, subscribe, notifications, and all that jazz. We are back. It's been a bit since the two of us were together for an episode. Life is getting lifey, sometimes in good ways, sometimes in not so good ways. My name is Brian Ford. As always, I'm here with my co-host, Josh. Josh, how you doing?
Doing great. It's been a really long time. I feel kind of rusty, but I started a new job. We got a lot going on. Those things take precedent to some of this stuff, but I'm very excited about the football season coming up. Seems like it's getting closer and closer.
Yeah. We what is it? OTAs, rookie camp, OTAs, mini
Yep.
camp, all in the rearview mirror. Got a few weeks of break in the slight dead zone here in Dynasty season, although there really never is a dead zone in Dynasty season. And then training camp for real coming up soon. And that's one of the reasons why we're continuing to discuss backfields. One of the things about fantasy football, especially in the new sort of meta of zero RB and the new way the NFL deploys running backs, is trying to read the tea leaves on how the usage is going to be and trying to get in early on the guys who are going to produce or whose value is going to go up and that sort of thing. And so the last time we were together, we did 5 somewhat ambiguous backfields, and we'll be doing that again tonight. Any recent observations from startups or trades or anything like that with running backs that have popped out to you, or any nuggets from camp that you saw that caught your eye or anything like that?
I'm a lot more excited about this rookie class of running backs than I was a few weeks ago, even during rookie drafts. We both had said it's not quite as bleak as people made it out to be. It's just a little lacks the people at the top, but I've moved Jonathan Brooks up into my top 10. And that's due to other people just moving down. But I think veterans are still very cheap. You can trade for them for almost nothing if you're competing. And if you're not competing, I'm kind of come to the realization, just get what you can while you can. Because during this season, some of these guys like Derrick Henry, Aaron Jones, their value could just plummet to basically zero. So if you're not really competing, you're kind of stuck in the middle. I say just get what you can while you can. And that's just kind of a realization I've had lately about that.
Yeah. I've been in 3 recent startups. 2 are done. 1 is still ongoing. And one of them was kind of really wild and unpredictable. I'm going to kind of toss that out the window. Another was very much, people were playing chicken, waiting on RB. And then in the third, I'm looking at the board right now, seems pretty standard in that, the guys that are going in the first 4 rounds, if you look up ADP, are going in the first 4 rounds, and then things kind of play out the way you would expect them to. But I'm not one of the people taking them in the first 4 rounds. Running backs for me are, things are different in a startup and in an existing league, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit as we go through these backfields. But if I'm in a startup and you're asking me to spend, a 3rd or 4th round pick on a guy like Jonathan Taylor or Etienne or even HN or, Kyron, like, I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
If I want him, I'll trade for him. I'm not spending, a high pick on him in a startup.
Yeah, a lot of that for me, I've been a lot more willing to go ahead and take like a young tight end who's producing like McBride or Laporta. Before, there hasn't really been, that appeal outside of just Kelsey and Andrews. And then you just wait till round 6 or 7. Throw Pitts in there 3rd round. I found myself looking there a lot more than I normally would be to get my RB1. Or, get your second QB if you go wide receiver, one of the other ones.
Yeah, for sure. Well, before we kick off into our 5 backfields tonight, time to pay the bills. Tonight's show is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Underdog has it all. Player pick'ems, DFS, best ball, etc. It's hot best ball summer. I'm in the streets. I'm spending money that I don't have, that I can't afford, because I'm a degen and an addict, and I can't stay away. And so you can do BBM5, marathon, sprint, eliminator, weekly winners, and shorter time box ones like Chihuahuas and Schnauzers and puppies and superflexes and all that jazz. And they're not just football. They have every major sport. You can sign up with our promo code GF2 and get a 50% deposit match up to $250. That's up to $250 from them. So if you deposit $100, you get 50 more from them. If you deposit $500, you get $250 from them. But if you deposit 501, the free money stops. So just, open the Underdog app, go to underdog.com, use our promo code GF2. We'll put the QR code up here for you. So if you're watching on the YouTubes and you just want to scan the code and that sort of thing, you can. Josh, are you doing much best ball these days? Too busy? Too broke? What's going on with that? Too much baseball or?
Yes, to all three of those. I actually haven't even done. I did a startup well before rookie drafts. I haven't done one since. Like I said, I just started a new job, so once I'm gonna start looking in the next few weeks to join a few more startups, and I'll probably will hop on Underdog here soon. But I haven't done a single best ball draft yet.
I don't want to tell you how many I've done. All right. That's what happens when you're fun employed.
Yeah.
Like I am. All right. So very famously, question mark. Last time we were together, we put up the slides, and that kind of kept us on track a little bit. So we're going to do that again with these 5 backfields tonight. So again, the term ambiguous is perhaps not the best term to use here. Ambiguous backfields sort of has specifically a meaning. JJ Zacharyson kind of coined it about like where guys are going, and and the one with the higher ADP, and that it's kind of come more now to mean a little bit murky about like who's going to have what role and how much usage and that sort of thing. So some of these are not the traditional ambiguous backfield in the strictest sense. The same way that zero RB isn't zero RB anymore. It's just a sort of a way of like waiting on running back. So where in the past a quote unquote dead zone running back, that was a description of their ADP range, and now it's just a genre of running back, much like folk music, right? Was a description of its origins, but then just kind of became a genre or a sound. Same thing with alternative music. But no one's here for the music history lesson, so let's get crack-a-lacking with the backfields tonight. So first one up on the menu is the LA Rams. So on draft night, when Blake Corum was drafted, I was on a stream with Jesse and some of the DWZ guys, and me and one of the other guys, were pushing back on the idea that this was a bad landing spot for Corum. I said this is a lot better for Corum than it is for Kyren. Since then the debate has gone back and forth in the the dynasty and fantasy bubble about there is evidence that Sean McVay loves bell cows. But has he ever had 2 guys that are this similar and this good together at the same time, plus the repeated injuries of Kyren Williams and that sort of thing? So we've got Kyren, ostensibly the RB1, the highest ranked, going for 2. He's in our top 10 at RB10. KTC has him at 9. Fantasy Calc has him at 9. He's going in the 411 and startup ADP as the 9th running back off the board, versus Corum, who is RB31. KTC is RB23. Fantasy Calc 22. And according to Dynasty Data Lab, ADP is the 1010 at RB28. So I guess my question is, how do you see the usage and roles playing out, and is the gap between the two justified or too big or that sort? What's your early take on the Rams backfield?
So my early take, I don't think they drafted Corum to take over Kyren Williams' role. Kyren Williams even missed time last year. He seemed to has been hurt or nicked up every year, and I think this is just a really good young insurance policy that will bring you very similar to results to what Kyren Williams will, and he's younger. As far as usage go, it's really hard to say, but I still think Kyron Williams is going to get more carries, probably 65, 35, something like that. But all it takes is one Kyron Williams injury, and Corum gets some touches, he gets some momentum, and he starts to get a feel for the game. Then it could be a different story. But I think starting out, it's still Kyron's backfield.
Yeah, for sure. I still am going back and forth on the question of, how much of a bell cow is Kyron going to be? Corum, for me, was not a guy that I loved. I thought he had a high floor, a smart player who's kind of a plug and play, can contribute right away, but more of a low ceiling approach. They've done a lot with their offensive line and their run scheme to develop more inside running, more power running, and so that's gonna, I think, lessen concern about wear and tear and things like that on the backs. Sometimes, I mean, it's sort of inevitable. Running backs get injured and that sort of thing. I think, and again, this is just kind of a hunch. Corum is possibly going to be taking some touchdowns away from Kyron. I know they like to have the same guys on the field at once, and so they don't tip a play and that sort of thing. But Corum is really good at being small and teleporting out on the other side of big hog offensive linemen, and all of a sudden he's in the end zone. And so I'm wondering, is McVay sticking with his sort of history of bell cow, or is he saying, here's a guy who's got a similar skill set to Kyron and is a little bit bigger, right? By like 15 pounds, I think, or maybe more. And is this something that I can now leverage into, looks down in the inside the 10, inside the 5, where it may stray from their tendency to have the same personnel on the field all the time, but ultimately will score more touchdowns and take some hits off of Kyron, because they talk about, so the stats say they are into bell cow, but the coach speak last year and in the offseason was they did want to get some touches off of Kyron. When Kyron came back from injury, they were giving the ball to freaking Royce Freeman and stuff to try to so I don't know that this mantra that McVay is a bell cow coach, I don't know that, like, is it going to hold up? Is it going to change this year? And I think that's the key question when trying to suss out these two guys.
No, I agree with you. The only thing, Kyron was good in the red zone. They're both really good, but I could see him taking some. And there's also a chance where this is similar to the Falcons' backfield a few years ago, and they had Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman,
Mm-hmm.
where they both get on the field a lot, and they're both good enough in fantasy to be able to start. So, yeah, I think that's pretty likely. I agree with you.
And for the audio listeners, I don't know that the team is going to keep 5 running backs, and so Ronnie Rivers, Boston Scott, and Zach Evans are left on the roster, with contracts that are pretty easy to get out of. Ronnie Rivers is a restricted free agent after this year. Boston Scott, who's 29 already, is a UFA after this year. Zach Evans, of course, still on his rookie deal. Of those 3, anyone stick out as like, the sort of definite third back, and any one of them worth like a round 26 pick in a startup, or are they just so off the radar?
If I'm gonna take a shot on someone, it'd probably be Zach Evans. I liked him coming out of college, and I was hoping he'd get more run. We know what Ronnie Rivers is, and reality will probably say that Ronnie Rivers will get more touches than Zach Evans. But for long term, in the dynasty aspect, I'd rather draft Zach Evans and Ronnie Rivers. You could probably pick up off the waivers or something, because I don't even think. I mean, he might get drafted, but I still would rather take Zach Evans.
All right. So moving right along. Speaking of Tevin Coleman and Devonta Freeman, we have the Spears Pollard matrix here on Tennessee. So we've got Spears, who Will be 23 in later this month. He's on his rookie deal through 2026. Going for 2, he's RB 25. You know what? Let's do it this way. And then we have Pollard, who's 27. They just signed him. He's the one that they hand selected and gave the money to, and not drafted by this regime. You know, the mantra we always hear. There's an out in his contract after 2025. He's a UFA after 26. So let's look at these numbers here, right? Going for 2, RB 25, Spears. Pollard, RB 26. KTC, RB 21, Spears. Pollard, RB 31. Fantasy calc, it's almost reversed, where Spears is RB 30 and Pollard is RB 24. And in Dynasty Data Lab, they are literally going RB 26 and 27, Spears and Pollard, one at the 912 and one at the 1003. I think what the market is telling us is they don't know what to do with these guys, and the players are so similar in their archetype, and we see an improved offensive line on Tennessee and the chance that both of them can produce, because you're probably going to want to run a bit and do some checkdowns to sort of, I don't want to say hide Will Levis, but give Will Levis the best chance at success, because he's not the greatest quarterback. Personally, I'm taking the stand on. Well, I mean, they're just doing. I think they know that what they've got in Will Levis. He's got a good.
I agree.
He's got a good arm and he's mobile, but his footwork sucks. He sucks under pressure, and he sucks at reading coverages. He can improve on those, but right now, if I had him, you're damn right I'm going to beef up the offensive line, bring in my father to coach it, bring in another running back, give veteran receivers to him who know what they're doing. You know what I mean? Like, I need to give this guy a soft landing for now. I seem to be taking some sort of stand on this because I have Spears way up there. And I just kind of, earlier in the offseason, he was ranked really high. And I said, no, that doesn't really make sense. Let's see what happens. And then they bring in Pollard. And it's like, I still was like hesitating. And then the more I thought about it and the more I sorted guys out, and other guys fell for me, like Jacobs or Javonte Williams or that sort of thing. And truth be told, I did listen to I wish I could remember who it was, but they were making a great case for Spears as far as he's the guy to have. But anyway, he's the younger, more explosive guy, right? Like, there's an argument that they gave money to Pollard, and so they're gonna and they chose him, and so he's gonna get more usage. And to me, I don't even know if this is a question of more usage as much as it is who's explosive, who's gonna have those explosive plays, who's gonna be efficient, who's gonna be a more and better receiver out of the backfield. And to me, that's Tyjae Spears, a guy that I loved coming out of college. If not for Kyle, sinking them in our going for 2 rankings as like RB 35 and 40 or something like that. Anyway, so Spears is 13 for me, and I have Pollard at 17. So I like both. I have a small difference between them, like the market, but those are 2 different tiers for me. And honestly, like, Spears is right behind Kyron Williams and Kenneth Walker, and like I think he even was for me like last week above those guys. I just kind of move them around in the tier depending on what mood I'm in, apparently. But anyway, so all that to say, I seem to be taking a flag plant that Spears is the guy to have. Spears is the guy I want. There's another aspect of this backfield I want to talk about in a second. How are you approaching the Spears Pollard thing?
I agree with you. I like Spears a good bit more. I have Tyjae Spears at 16, the top of the 3rd tier, and then I have Tony Pollard 23. So it's a fairly significant gap, and like you said, Spears is more explosive. He can catch the ball better. And he's younger and has a little more durability as of now. So I do think he is the one to own. Pollard's 27. His explosiveness we saw this first year or 2 in Dallas wasn't apparent last year. Not saying he doesn't have it, but if I were making a bet, I would bet on Spears. He looked really good. He outplayed Derrick Henry last year, in my opinion, like looking at the tape and stuff. I think Haskins might get some run this year, though. I don't know if that's what you're about to talk about, but out of these other running backs, I don't know much about Dylan Johnson, honestly,
Mhm.
but Haskins is a little bit of a bigger back, and I think he'll definitely get some run, at least in the goal line.
Yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. Is neither of Spears or Pollard profile as sort of the grimy, tough yardage guys, right? Pollard improved with his efficiency and explosiveness after like week 11 last year, but the vibes on him are so bad compared to where I still have faith in him to be more like the guy that he was in the later part of the season, especially when he's not going to be asked to have as many touches with Spears there. But either way, neither profiles as the guy that you're going to shoot in the A gap on the 2 yard line or on a third and a long 2, right? So I think to me it comes down to Dylan Johnson or Haskins. Dylan Johnson, the UDFA, who's 23, and Haskins, he's on his rookie deal through 25, and he'll be 25 in November. Way down in the rankings, like 120s in going for 2 and 90s and 100s and 80s and other places, not even really registering on ADP and that sort of thing. So Haskins coming out of college was like the top 8 or 10 backs in that class for me. I liked him, and he can even, catch a pass or two. Last year, if people are wondering why you may not have heard of him or heard from him, all of last year he was on like the commissioner's some kind of list where he like couldn't play. I think he was a bad boy and did something. And then I think, or wait, was that where he did something, but then they put him on IR? Either way, he didn't play at all last year, and so he's back this year. But the team, still added the UDFA Dylan Johnson. I think personally, Dylan Johnson can walk right into some tough carries between the tackles, short yardage, goal line stuff, and would be a guy to have with like some slight contingency upside should Spears or Pollard go down. But at the same time, we don't know much about Haskins because he wasn't around last year. And so I don't think Julius Chestnut or Jabari Small are the answer. And so the question remains, is there going to be a third Tennessee back, not that we're saying is going to be in your flex spot every week, but who is going to maybe get some goal line looks and as a guy to stash for if somebody gets hurt and that sort of thing. If there was one, my lean would be Dylan Johnson. I know it's just a UDFA, so they didn't like spend a lot on him, but I don't know. It's like if you're a coaching staff and you're looking at your roster, if you love Hassan Haskins, do you bother to even bring in Dylan Johnson? I don't know. But that's also kind of opposite of my Spears over Pollard take because they went ahead and looked at their roster and did add Pollard. Although, they had a big void to fill with Derrick Henry. So all that to say, there might be a third Tennessee back worth looking at. I'm stashing Dylan Johnson more than I am Haskins. What say you?
I think I'm still just going to stick with Haskins just because it's a little cheaper. It really is a dart throw. We don't really know what Haskins can bring. But even though he's a little bit older, he's just cheaper, and the margin's so narrow for me that I'll just take whoever I can get later. And based on KTC, it's 90 to 106, so that's fairly significant.
Yeah. All right, let's move on now to our third backfield, and that's the Buffalo Bills. And so we've got Cook and Davis at the top, and then 3 other backs we might want to talk about. James Cook, he'll be 25 in November, and oddly enough, so will rookie Ray Davis. One is on their rookie deal through 2025, the other through 2027. James Cook is RB13 in going for 2, RB13 in KFC, 14 KFC, KTC, RB14 in FC, Fantasy Calc, and Dynasty Data Lab ADP has him at 604 in startups, running back 14 off the board. Ray Davis going for 2, running back 40, and I think I might be the one yanking that number up a little bit. KTC has him at 54, Fantasy Calc at 50, Dynasty Data Labs, the 16.16 with RB52 off the board positioning. Davis. So Cook is one of those guys where it's like, I can see it. I can see that when Joe Brady, took over as OC, they almost flip-flopped. Like they went from like the second lowest run percentage to like the second highest. And James Cook was used a lot, et cetera, et cetera. I think he has like 2 or 4 total rushing TDs his entire career, though. And I think the question for me is not so much like Cook is one of those guys where it's like between age and the offense and what we saw with Joe Brady, it's like, okay, we like him, but he feels like to me like a lot of the guys after running back 6 or 8 where it's like, all right, who else are you going to put there? You're not going to put like an older Josh Jacobs or Javonte Williams above him. So you're kind of left with, all right, well, I guess Ken Walker and James Cook will be there, right? The concern I have with Cook is, what if he's just a between the 20s guy? Because I really like, and I think you do too, Ray Davis. First of all, we love the story, right? But this is a guy who kind of comes in ready to roll. He's an older guy and has, led 3 different schools broke 1,000 yards at 3 different schools, can pass pro, can catch passes. Is he as good a pass catcher and as electric as James Cook? No, but there's a chance he can steal a lot of passing down snaps. Well, not a lot, but some passing down snaps from Cook because he can pass pro, right? And so that matters, right? So I think people are kind of underrating the impact of Davis. And so I tend to be higher on him than consensus. And there's been a few rookie drafts where when faced with a choice between him and some other backs I liked, I leaned him because I'm like, well, maybe he produces right away and I can trade him. Or if it's a team that I want to compete, he's getting touchdowns right away, right? The other question with these guys is Josh Allen. He had 15 rushing touchdowns last year after like 6 and 8 and 8 and 6 or something like that, right? So does the team want him doing that? On the one hand, with a different receiving core this year, he's probably going to have to take the team on his back a little bit more. On the other hand, to me personally, I read the drafting of Ray Davis as saying we need some big guy, right, who can get those tough yards, including near the goal line, because we don't want Josh Allen with 15 rushing touchdowns this year. And personally, hell, I'm just a bozo with a mic, but I think if those guys are smart, they're not asking Josh Allen to do that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with you. I have Ray Davis at 38, so I'm ahead of the rest of the going for 2 people as well. I think they drafted Ray Davis so Josh Allen won't have to run the ball that many times, because I think he is going to have to carry the team on his back, and if he's running every time they're within the 5-yard line, they're going to catch on, and he's not going to carry the team if he's hurt. So I do think that from now, anytime within the 10-yard line, Ray Davis is at risk to come in and steal a touchdown from James Cook. I think he'll get more this year with Brady, but like you said, he hasn't, even back at UGA, never really showed the ability to run good at the goal line or to really produce heavily for touchdowns outside of passes or kind of gadget plays. So I do really like Ray Davis. I also think Frank Gore Jr. kind of similarly. I think that's just, again, saying they don't want Josh Allen to have to rush for 15 touchdowns. If he does, good. But Josh Allen was their goal line back and their quarterback last year. And I don't think they want to keep doing that as he gets older. Mm-hmm. So I'm right on board with everything you said. Outside of those 3, I'm not really that interested in this backfield. Ty Johnson might, if Cook gets hurt, will come in as a 3rd down back probably, but that's about it.
Yeah. I'm looking here at the ADP, and so I think we agree on the dynamic of Cook, Davis, and Josh Allen, right? To me, it's a price thing, right? If I'm in a startup, you're asking me to spend an early 6th-round pick on James Cook, right? Other guys in that round that I like more, off the top of my head, T. Higgins, liking them more is off the top of my head. I am reading off the ADP. T. Higgins, Xavier Worthy, Hawkinson, especially in Dynasty, where it's like, you're not so concerned about him missing the first 8 weeks of the season. Probably Addison, taking a shot on a rookie like Brian Thomas, Debo, JSN, quarterback Bryce Young. Give me. I don't know that I can spend an early 6th round pick on James Cook, especially when I can get, I don't know, if I want to compete, Joe Mixon in the 7th. I can get a younger guy like Trey Benson in the 7th. I can take Ramondre in the 8th. I can take David Montgomery, who is like right behind Cook for me in a couple spots, in the 9th, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't, it's more of a, comes back to, if I'm in a position where I think I need Cook for my team, I'll pay market value for him, probably in an existing league, but not the guy I love clicking in a startup.
Yeah, I agree. I have a few James Cook shares. Those were all in startups where I felt like I got a good deal for him. But I will probably won't be even through trade acquiring many more. He's already 25. His rookie deal's over. If he keeps producing like this, he's going to want more money than a team's probably willing to pay him.
Mm-hmm.
That just seems like kind of a mess. So I'm definitely in startups. If I'm trying to win now, I'm getting veterans, towards round 10. And if I'm rebuilding, I'm taking guys like Trey Benson, Marshawn Lloyd. And you can get those guys around 8, 9, or 10, something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
I would much rather do that. And the James Cook shares I have, I'll just ride it out while I can.
Mm-hmm.
And if he absolutely busts or pops next year for a lot, I might just go ahead and try and get what I can for him.
And one pick after Cook in ADP is Jonathan Brooks.
Yeah, I'd much rather have Jonathan Brooks.
Now, in the 6th round, okay, so startups are it's always a balance between the idea of be water, seek value, draft for value, trade for need, but also keeping in mind that you are sort of building out a roster. The board is taking shape in a certain way where, the selections you made might dictate that, this is going to look like try to contend team first year, etc. I don't know. To me, it's one of those things where give me Jonathan Brooks 99 times out of 100, even if I think I'm going to be competing. Like if I don't like, not only is he a tier above in my rankings and a few spots ahead of my rankings, but that's also a value play to me, right? Like, he's got insulated value until he gets in the field because people still love him. And then once he does, he's the 1A on that team as far as I'm concerned. So, I mean, yeah, give me Brooks every time. Yeah.
No, I agree 100%. Because even if you're competing, you can still draft Brooks and still get some veterans late, like most or some other guys that throw in until he's back, and then you can do what you need to with them. So, yeah, I agree. It shouldn't even be that close either.
All right, so let's take a look at these other 3 backs you mentioned. Ty Johnson, who's 27 in September. He's a UFA after this year. Frank Gore, a UDFA, added in draft season. And then Darrington Evans, sort of a guy who's kind of always leaned on his speed, but is now 26 in July and is a UFA after this year. Frank Gore Jr. is the highest ranked in all the different outlets that we're quoting here, with Ty Johnson far behind, and then Evans even further behind that. Gore is interesting. He was kind of used in different ways in college, even like split out wide. He's more of a Cook than a Ray Davis. Ty Johnson is more of a Cook than a Ray Davis, but can do more Ray Davis things than Frank Gore can.
Yeah.
Would not be surprised if Darrington Evans is the cut here. Would not be surprised if Frank Gore makes the team because he can return kicks in this new kick return rule. Obviously, in the dynasty format, he's the guy to have. Do you have any Frank Gore shares? He's going in the 21st round in startups. We have him going for 2 as RB95. People like him more. 69 on KTC, 72 in Fantasy Calc, and 71 off the board in Dynasty Data Lab ADP. So I'm going to talk about my ranking for Frank Gore because it's
Yep.
low. It's low. I have him at 97. Now it's a little because early in the offseason, like after a little while, my tiers are more of like buckets of player types, right? And so I've got a big tier of like young guys that could or younger guys that could, right? From 76 to 91, right? And then there's like this little tier of veterans that are kind of on the fringe, like Cordell Patterson, Jamal Williams, Dernish Johnson, Samaje Perine, and Craig Reynolds. I want to see if they get cut, if they make teams, and that sort of thing. And then Frank Gore starts my tier of like another group of younger guys that I think probably are, a little even more fringy than the guys above them. But by the late August, I can totally see, okay, they've cut Darrington Evans. Ty Johnson's going to, be inactive most weeks and he's going to be like a punt gunner. And I've got, Frank Gore as like my RB 75 instead. Right. So that's kind of just explaining where I'm at with that. He's a UDFA and he kind of already plays a James Cook role. So that's why I'm a little down on him. Yeah.
No, I have one share of Frank Gore Jr. and it was just picking him up. Most of the times in leagues, he was going towards the end of the fourth, and there were just other guys I was going for there than him. I was trying to draft some late tight ends like Eric Hall, Dio Johnson, guys like that instead. So I only have one share, and I picked him up for $1 of Fab. So if it doesn't work out, but I wasn't really going out trying to get him.
Now again, right? Like, pay attention, folks, because in July and August, like, and especially preseason buzz and that sort of thing, like, say, it's probably worth it to go grab Frank Gore for $3, right? And go, I don't know, dump some, tight end that you've been stashing. Because the team's going to want to see what they have in Frank Gore, right? So he's going to get some looks early in the preseason. All it takes is him catching a swing pass and, running against some third string defenders and having a big play. And now all of a sudden you're getting a third and a fourth or something for a guy that you picked up for $3. So that's another way to kind of think about these backfields too, is not just like what you think of the player or the usage, but it's like whose price is going to go up by the time we're done with preseason.
Yeah, it's not going to be Ty Johnson.
No, it is not. All right, so San Francisco doesn't seem ambiguous to people, and I agree. Obviously, there's CMC the GOAT. But the question is what's behind him, right? The CMC conversation, maybe we can have another day. I don't know if it's hot takey, but I don't know that relying on a 28-year-old running back, even a really good one on a very good team, to have the same kind of usage, volume, health, and production that he did last year is a good bet. I don't know that he should be going 101 on underdog, etc. But either way, the question is what's behind him, right? And so Elijah Mitchell is sort of the incumbent when it comes to the running back, backup running back, but he's had some injury issues. He'll be 20. He is 26. He is going for twos, RB 63, KTC 68, Fantasy Calc 71. And on Dynasty Data Lab ADP going in the 20th round at RB 69. Nice. Some people love Garendo, the rookie. He'll be 24 this month, a bit on the older side for a rookie. He's at 72 on going for two, 67 for KTC, 64 for Fantasy Calc, 61 in the Dynasty Data Lab ADP. I don't like Garendo as much as some other people do. I'll explain that in a second. Then there's some fun guys who, special teams may not make the roster that some people think scrappy Cody Schrader, who's like Scrappy Doo, is going to be 25 in September, could be the guy you want instead of Garendo. I would not be surprised if that's true. Their rankings are closer for me than I think for a lot of people. He's not even registering on KDC or DDL. He's RB 87 in Fantasy Calc and RB 80 in going for two. There's also the sort of theory of, when the 49ers draft running backs, like don't take the first one, like Tyrion David Price or something, to take the second one, right? So I guess the question is, where do you stand on that nexus of Mitchell, Garendo, and Schrader? Because I guess I'll save my Garendo take and let you take this one first.
Yeah, honestly, Garendo and Schrader aren't on my radar as much as Mitchell and Mason, just because there's already been like instances where McCaffrey and Mitchell are out, and Jordan Mason got the touches, and based on the coaches, he did a good job and he ran the offense well. And I know in a Kyle Shanahan offense, that's key. These other two guys are rookies, not going to be as familiar. Jordan Mason is, and Garendo is basically the same player to me as Jordan Mason. One just doesn't know the offense already, and one does. I mean, obviously in a dynasty round, 4th round, it doesn't hurt to take a shot on one of them. I didn't do it. I don't have a share of either one. I don't really like Garendo. I think he was way overhyped because of his 40 time. But Mitchell is shown to be really effective when he starts. He is very, very injury prone, probably will miss some time, but the coaches love him. He's done really good scoring touchdowns and getting good efficiency. And so did Mason when he stepped in. So I like those three more. And then it's kind of a toss up between Garendo and Schrader after that. So I'd at cost, I'd rather have Mason than either one of them.
Yeah. Worth noting, Mason is kind of in the ballpark in rankings with all those guys, except on KTC, where he's in the ballpark in our rankings.
Yeah.
KTC and Fantasy Calc, he's much lower than the other two guys. My Garendo take is similar to yours, overrated, overhyped. He's got a tantalizing size speed combo, and I understand why people like that, right? And there's some very sharp people who like Garendo, and even me, like I'm saying on Garendo, like he could already have Elijah Mitchell's job, and we don't know it because just Shanahan likes these fast backs, but that doesn't mean that I like Garendo much. I agree. Like, so the sharp people that are like, say for example, like they're touting him as in a 0 RB build in best ball, right? And I get that, but if you peel the onion and look at his college, first he's a 5-year player, right? And okay, so if you want to give him a pass for being behind Braylon Allen at Wisconsin, fine. He was also behind what it was, whatever his face is, Chaz Malusi or whatever his name. And then when he goes to Louisville, still has to share carries with UDFA Jawar Jordan, who is smaller, the guy that I expected to be faster, and despite being smaller, was kind of relied on in close more than Garendo was. And so to me, those are kind of like, that's kind of red flaggy. And so it's kind of like you're just kind of looking at the testing and saying, I'm gonna get behind this guy. And so I have like Garendo, I think in the 80s, and then Schrader a little bit behind there, just kind of as a recognition of, okay, the team did spend some draft capital on Garendo. I have him at 81, and I have Schrader, I think, in that same tier somewhere. Actually, I just shifted my rankings. I have Schrader at 79, so I'm taking my stand, but in the same tier. And so Schrader, for those who don't know, another like 5 or 6 year player. His story is great. Was like just an underdog and walk on like everywhere he went, and wound up at a Missouri team, technically leading the SEC in rushing his last season. He's not super fast, he's not super strong, he's not super quick, but he does all those things well enough and can catch some passes. And I can see him, being on special teams as both like a gunner and maybe even a kick returner. And I don't know. He just seems like the type of guy that you want to hang around in a roster more than say like, oh, well, maybe Garendo's developmental, but we're going to stay with him. So that's always been my Garendo take is the overrated part. Yeah.
Yeah. As far as Schrader goes, I mean, there might be a reason he was always a walk on and undrafted, but also all it takes in a Shanahan offense is to do the right thing and be at the right place at the right time. That's really all you need to gain his trust. But as far as Garindo goes, just the game speed and 40 time are just vastly different. Garindo had practically the same game speed as Audric Estime, who ran a 4.7.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't get hyping him up because he doesn't run that fast in pads in a game environment. He's actually slower, and so I probably will never have any shares of Garindo unless it's just free.
I mean, I have enough leagues, and I'm much of a I'm enough of a diversification slappy to have a couple shares. Like, I get it, but yeah, that game speed thing, to me, I extrapolate that into that he's a slow processor.
Yeah,
exactly. And because you're running slower than you should, which means you're not processing the field. And so I don't know. Maybe we're definitely fading Garindo at cost. You seem to like Mason a little bit more than I do. I kind of think of it as, well, with Garindo and Schrader on board, younger, fresher legs. But you're right. Knows the offense and has gotten touches when guys have been hurt.
Yeah, that just depends on how quick they pick up the playbook. Schrader or Garindo could pick it up real quick and easily supplant him. I think just starting out, if something happens to Mitchell or McCaffrey, Mason will be the guy to step up.
And then, of course, there's Patrick Taylor Jr. And so we move on. No offense. Listen, Patrick Taylor Jr., by virtue of being in the NFL for a few years, is among some of the best athletes in the world and has definitely made a good, solid living with money for himself. And so no shade there whatsoever. And now we go to Miami. This is fun, man. This is fun. So I kind of split it up into three. I've got Achane, Mostert, and Wright as kind of like, I think, the fantasy relevant rotation. And then the other guys are they going to make the team? Who is going to make the team? Are they just special teamers in Salvon Ahmed, Jeff Wilson, and Chris Brooks? So let's start with Achane. He'll be 23 in October, still on his rookie deal, of course. Going for 2, RB6, KTC RB6, Fantasy Calc RB8, Dynasty Data Lab going off at the 409 at RB8. And so we know that. We know that he's going to be the guy, the young electric guy that's going to be higher ranked. So let's talk about him first, okay? I have, Thomas Tipple kind of talked me into moving him up from 9 to 6, but still the same tier. But to me, it's one of those, well, who else are you going to put there situations, right? The single week upside, the electric play, the reportedly increased passing usage this year, et-cetera. Okay, I'm going to put that guy RB6, right? At the same time, we did have a concern about durability, and he did get injured 4 times last year, if you include the preseason, right? I'm not spending a 4th round pick on Achane in a startup. I'm just not doing it. Again, if I think I want him in a league, I'll trade for him. But when you're asking me, do I want Achane at the 409 or, in that neighborhood? Do I want Brock Bowers, Dalton Kincaid, Devonta Smith, Nico Collins, even Pittman, and maybe even Kyron? Like, come on, what are we doing here, right? So, where do you stand on Achane, and then we'll talk about the other guys.
So right now I have Achane at 10. And the only reason that is I think he has one of the widest range of outcomes for any player right now. Yeah. And that's not just for this year, but moving forward. Like, there's a chance he has another serious injury and just never gets back. But there's also a chance where he gets more carries and still averages 6 or 7 yards a carry and has 10, 15 touchdown upside in this offense. And, he's a top 5 dynasty running back. I just have him at 10. I won't be drafting him at that price. I made a trade for him recently. I don't know if I brought this up before, but in a contending league where I had Stroud and Lamar Jackson, I traded Kyler and a 24 second for Tank Dell, Achane, Aaron Rodgers, and a 24 third.
That makes sense for your team for sure. Yeah.
Because I'm competing and I can't start Stroud, Lamar, and Kyler.
Yeah.
So I'm only going to be trading for him if I need him. I
Mm.
have him in a few leagues from his rookie season, and I'm just going to hope for the best. But man, it could bottom out pretty badly for him, especially with Jalen Wright coming in because he has a similar skill set. I mean, he's not quite as fast, but he's really fast. He's bigger, and I think he'll hold up a little bit better. So yeah, it's after this year. It's Wright and Achane's backfield, but for this year, Mostert, I didn't even mention. He was one of the best running backs last year. I think he's still going to be that. He didn't show any signs of slowing down, getting hurt at 32. And the graphic says he's out after 24. Then I think they're going to use him this year and use him heavily. But 3 running backs can be useful in this offense. There was a game last year where I think Mostert and HM both had 4 touchdowns. So I think all 3 are going to be very good. And I'm excited to see Jalen Wright, see what he does.
Yeah, so let's talk about Mostert and Wright then. Mostert, age 32, there's an out in his contract after this year. If they do keep him, he's going to be UFA after 2025. Going for 2 has him at RB 43, KTC 42, Fantasy Calc 40, Dynasty Data Lab in the 1307 as RB 42. Jalen Wright, who is 21 on his rookie deal, of course, is going for 2 RB 33. KTC RB 32, Fantasy Calc RB 34, Dynasty Data Lab about a round earlier at the 1206 and RB 38. So I think what the market is telling us, what the rankings are telling us, is that, okay, we see both of these guys as not the upside of HN, but as long as Mostert's still there, Wright's ranking will be kept down a little bit. But because he's younger, obviously in his dynasty, we have him higher than Mostert in the rankings. Mostert had I don't want to use the term outlier, but just I'll use it colloquially, but he kind of had an outlier season for himself last year as far as health goes.
Yeah.
And so I'm not trusting Mostert just to be healthy this year. Some people think, people are saying, Jalen Wright is kind of a threat to HN, and to a degree he is. He's about 15, 20 pounds heavier, and that kind of thing. To me, he's Mostert. He's the replacement for Mostert, as you noted before. So he landed on the right team. If there's going to be a team that can take a fast back who's used to light boxes and be innovative with it, it's Miami. I think we learned that, especially with HN. And he was selected in the 4th round, but if you look at the trade, they used next year's 3rd in that trade up. So really, they spent a 3rd on him. And I know that whatever, maybe that's a loophole, but to me that's meaningful. To me they said this is a guy worth getting, worth trading a day 2 capital piece to go get. He's a guy that I've liked pretty much since the beginning of the process. I think it would be a cop out and easy to say it's going to be Mostert early in the season and then Jalen Wright as he gets his legs under him. I love him. I love Jalen Wright. He's in a big tier of young guys that are kind of could go either way depending on playing time. I guess the question is if you're a contender, do you value Mostert more, or do you still say, nah, I'll take Wright, because not only can he be very similar to Mostert this year, who we don't expect to have as many touchdowns as he did last year, and I also, bonus, get the years of age on it. So I don't know. What say you? You're a legit contender. You can see yourself. It's June, but you can see your roster being, a high value roster and probably in the top 3 or 4 teams when the dance comes. You spending more for Mostert or more for Wright?
I would spend more for Wright just because I think if you negotiated it right, you could point out that Mostert's 32, had a career year. But say if I'm in a startup and I'm trying to win year 1, I'm going to try and take a shot on Mostert because I think there's a better chance where he has 10 plus touchdowns than Jalen Wright supplants him for his job without him getting hurt. Now, if he gets hurt, that could happen. And at the price, it's about equal. I'd be okay with drafting both of them. Like the San Francisco backfield, I'm happy with having more than one share out of this backfield.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not really one to handcuff running backs, but I have a few leagues where I have McCaffrey and Eli Mitchell, and it's really when competing saved my ass a few times by being able to plug someone in who's instantly productive. So if I'm trying to win this year, I'm going to take a shot on Mostert. But if I'm kind of in the middle or trying to rebuild, I'm obviously going to take Wright over HN even just because fourth round or a couple of firsts isn't worth it for me when I can get Jalen Wright.
Mm-hmm.
And one other point, all three of these guys have 4.3 speed. So Jalen Wright is more like Mostert because Mostert's also really fast and a little bit bigger bodied. So
Mm-hmm.
I think Wright is the same player as Mostert more so than HN.
Yep. And then the rest of the cast is Salvan Ahmed, who's 26 in December. He's a UFA after this year. Jeff Wilson, who's sticking around at 29 in November. He's a UFA after this year. They could have gotten rid of him. Not yet, but to me, that kind of indicates he's probably going to be on this roster. Chris Brooks, to me, is the most unique in that he's sort of the type of running back that they kind of don't use. He's a little bigger. He's better between the tackles than any of these guys. Probably not the pass catcher that Jeff Wilson can be. He might not even make the team or be on practice squad or something like that. So I don't know that any of these guys are relevant other than, I don't know, like I could see a week where because they're stubborn and annoying, Jeff Wilson gets a couple, in close carries and a couple catches, and you're like, come on, dude.
Yeah, I agree. Jeff Wilson's out of those three the one to own because we don't know even if someone's just not feeling 100%. They're like, I'm not really feeling it today, like Wright or Mostert. Then Jeff Wilson could easily hop in and steal a bunch of touches from some of them, or if he has a hot hand, go with that. He's done that in the past, and he's been honestly pretty good. I like drafting him towards, especially in redraft, like Scott Fishbowl style drafts. I usually always try and get Jeff Wilson with one of the last picks, or if I drop somebody, try and pick him up.
Let me ask you a question. So two guys that have been close in rankings since pre-draft, close in rookie draft ADP, and close now still in startup ADP are Wright and Marshawn Lloyd. I've heard more good buzz about Marshawn Lloyd as far as his usage and his role. I probably like Wright slightly better. Got a few shares of each. Do you lean one way or the other on those two?
Let me check my rankings. I'm pretty sure I have Lloyd 31, Wright 34. I think Lloyd's more of a floor play, but Wright has a higher ceiling in that offense with Mike McDaniels.
Mm-hmm.
So a chance to spike Jalen Wright just depends on what type of player you want.
Yeah.
At this point, I'd much rather lean with a higher floor guy at running back. That way, it doesn't completely bottom out. But yeah, I'd rather have Lloyd, but it's not by much. But Jalen Wright could easily, by the end of this year, if things happen a certain way, he could be a top 10, 15 running back because HN didn't. And he missed half the year. So
Yeah, so I technically have Lloyd one spot ahead of Wright, even though I kind of like Wright better as a player, only because I just, they're in the same tier, so it really doesn't matter much. But, Lloyd is one spot ahead because I kind of think he's going to get touches right away.
Yep.
But if there's going to be a guy who's going to play himself out of relevance with dumb mistakes, with vision and fumbling, it's going to be Marshawn Lloyd.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So interesting that those two are still neck and tailing each other everywhere in rankings and drafts and that sort of jazz. All right. So that does it for us. Next week, I don't know. We're going to be picking from a bunch of different backfields I have here on the graphic. I'd like to talk about some of these at some point this offseason. We've got Jacksonville, so we can revive my Tank Bigsby propaganda and talk about the reality that they want to take touches off of Travis Etienne. We can talk about Seattle and think about Kenneth Walker's inefficiency and Charb sort of getting some helium in some circles. We can talk about Washington, where we have, Eckler playing the Gibson role, and yet Brian Robinson thrived with Gibson, catching 50 passes last year. Where does that leave Chris Rodriguez? And what does that look like with the new regime in Cliff Kingsbury offense and a rushing quarterback? We can talk about Dallas, because what the is going on in Dallas? Who knows?
Battle, baby.
Who knows, man? Maybe by then Khalil Herbert's traded there or something like that. We can talk about Pittsburgh, that the market is kind of treating like Tennessee, in that Najee and Jalen Warren are very close in rankings and things like that. We can talk about Cleveland, where Nick Chubb has no timeline for return. And then there's Jerome Ford, and how much do they use Devonta Foreman? And, is Pierre Strong going to be relevant? Or we could talk about New Orleans, where Kamara, he left the last week of camp, wants to rework the contract. To me, is getting dusty. Kendre Miller, some people love as stepping up this year. How relevant is Jamal Williams still going to be, etc. So those are on the plate. Those are on the menu. We'll see what we get around to talking about next time. Do you have any preferences among those?
Look, I have not really hated on Arthur Smith in a while, so I would kind of like to touch on Pittsburgh. New Orleans would be a good one. Honestly, all of these, especially Washington, because I'm a big Brian Robinson fan.
Mm-hmm.
I love him. So, and it'll go back to the early first 5 episode days when I was hyping up BTN. You were telling me about Tank Bigsby, and I don't think either one of us was really right. We could just rehash that out and see where we stand.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be fun. We can just just take clips from there and just kind of replay them or something like that. So, yeah, this is just kind of us reading the tea leaves and seeing who we want and who we think might go up in value throughout the preseason. I think, we are more or less on the same page with a lot of these players. There's just, listen, in June, especially when I'm doing these D-Gen, underdog drafts, there's just guys that I just love clicking on, and guys like Jalen Wright and who else that we talked about today? Ray Davis and Spears. Like I just like clicking on them because they're my guys. So we'll see how that pans out. So that'll do it for us. Please make sure you like, subscribe, and review and all that jazz on audio feeds. Like, comment, subscribe, notifications here on video with YouTube or wherever else you're watching us. And yeah, time for plugs. Josh, where can we find you and your work?
You can find me on Twitter at Rotonaut, ROTONAUT. And you can also find me on Twitter tweeting out my 100% Audric Estimate shares once I finally do start doing best ball drafts. Cheapest running back you can get. It's going to be his backfield. He's been getting good reports. Javonte Williams hasn't been, so just confirming what we said before.
Confirming what you said before. No, yeah, I like Estimate more than a lot of people do. I don't know if it's going to be his backfield right away, but yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
It'll get there, but you can find, I just updated my rankings. That's at goingfor2.com. It had been a while just because I've been busy, been very tired, exhausted, all that stuff. But I did just update it. I'm going to keep doing it because this weekend I'm going to really get on Sleeper, reply to some trades, try and evaluate each team and see what I need. So that's something I really need to do soon. But I'll be tweeting about some of that stuff at Twitter also.
Right on. All right, you can follow me on Twitter at @FFJunkie_. Articles, but especially rankings on goingfor2.com. They're on goingfor2.com. A couple things to talk about. One, we got a lot of stuff there for you. DFS, redraft, best ball, dynasty, rankings, etc. We also have a Discord. You can go in the bottom right of the website, little purple thingy, and click on it. You can join the Discord. It's free. Lots of channels. This show has a channel that we should use more. But also they're going to be running like hella Scott Fishbowl mocks through there. So that's always fun for people, whether you're in the 20 or not. I am going to be taking June off from any articles for Fantasy Pros. I was scheduled to do 3 of them, but I had to reluctantly kind of back out because I really need to dedicate a lot of time to this job search this month. But we'll see. Dynasty Fever Pod is also on a semi hiatus until sometime in July. I might do an episode or two, but we'll be kicking back up again with training camp in July and August. So that'll do it for us. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and
Go Braves.